Okay, so now we're going to look at handout 14B, which is the other part of the pituitary gland called the posterior pituitary. So remember, we have a front part, the anterior pituitary that we just covered, makes 7 big hormones, right? Then we have a posterior pituitary that's behind it, and it is a lot simpler. So let's look at the posterior pituitary. And this is handout 14B, and this is a 100% review. Yay for you guys. If you remember from our chapter 1, going way back to chapter 1, we actually talked about the 2 hormones that are made by our posterior pituitary. So oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone are released by our posterior pituitary. Now, the good news is this is even easier because there are no releasing hormones. So it says hypothalamus releases the neurotransmitter hormones to release oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone. There are no releasing hormones that tell the posterior pituitary to release oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone. In fact, oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone are not even made in the posterior pituitary. They are made in the hypothalamus. They're called neurotransmitter hormones. And then they move down through a tract into the posterior pituitary, where the posterior pituitary releases them. So they're actually not even made in the posterior pituitary. Now, what do you need to know? Well, don't forget that oxytocin has several functions. Oxytocin is going to be the hormone that causes the uterus to contract during childbirth. It also tells the mammary glands to eject fluid. Remember that fluid at the beginning is called colostrum. So it's not telling the mammary glands to eject milk. It's telling the mammary glands to eject fluid, because that fluid could be colostrum or milk. And then remember, oxytocin can also be produced by both men and women, and it controls our long-term emotional attachment to people. So it's often referred to as the hormone of love. It keeps you wanting to be with the person for a long period of time. Then our second hormone is antidiuretic hormone. And antidiuretic hormone, remember, it tells the kidneys to retain water if we're dehydrated. Now, if you want to go back and review these a little more in detail, remember oxytocin is handout 1C. Antidiuretic hormone is our very first hormone that we ever learned. It's handout 1B. And then up here I just write hormones. These 2 hormones are made in our hypothalamus and they're released by the posterior pituitary. So just keep that in mind, that they are very different from our anterior pituitary hormones. So those anterior pituitary hormones are actually made in the pituitary gland. These posterior pituitary glands, these posterior pituitary hormones are made in the hypothalamus and then released by the posterior pituitary. All right, so that's handout 14B. Starting to lose it here. All right, next video.